Today we talk about a bit of a controversial one, maybe not, but it's still something I find fascinating that not everyone thinks about. Short-term flipping for long-term investing. What do I mean by that? When you look at something like Alpha Investments, what do you notice business model-wise? I find this stuff fascinating. But right now, when you look at his income, and we're not talking about the real estate, cool. We're not talking about his past career, cool. Like all of that is cool. Obviously, he's a successful man. But the current business model is getting arbitrage on these short-term sales, whether it's buying all of these cases of modern product by the pallet from his distributor, obviously getting a better price, and then selling at slightly below market. So all of his customers get a great deal, but because he buys such a huge amount, he's still making a profit. And then that profit goes straight into buying out all the Alpha cards. He has his stores where he sells some cards. He has collection buying and then he tries to sell again. And so he's doing all these little flips on all of these non-Alpha cards. And then that profit goes into, well, sustaining himself, but then also into the longer term plays. So notice how he's not just investing for the long term, and he's not just flipping for the short term. They are fueling each other, or well, the short term is more so fueling that long term. Now we go to something like an SM Pratt. Now, if you don't know what we're talking about, Alpha Investments is a huge MTG channel on YouTube. Now we go to SM Pratt, a solidly big Pokemon channel on YouTube. SM Pratt has his eBay store, selling relatively modern stuff. Once again, he flips these